What is the current situation with the British-German relationship? Alastair Campbell should know the British journalist was, among other things, government spokesman and political advisor to Tony Blair. In an interview for a podcast in Germany, he talked about Brexit, populists, and vaccination nationalism. After long-standing Brexit debates, pandemic border closings, and the recent fight over vaccines, the relationship between the EU and Great Britain has hit rock bottom. Most recently, it was about possible export bans for vaccines and the fundamental question of who has the better corona management. This vaccination campaign is a success, I acknowledge that, and I'm very happy. But it has nothing to do with Brexit, says British policy advisor, journalist and author Alastair Campbell on the podcast 0 Hour. He criticizes the government's attempts to instrumentalize the successes in vaccination. Brexit supporters see it as proof that it was right to leave the EU. I see that nonsense every time in the comments. Somebody in Brussels made the stupid mistake of mixing Brexit with his vaccination campaign, says Campbell. The now 63-year-old shaped British politics for decades. Among other things, he was government spokesman and Tony Blair's spin doctor. After the Brexit referendum, he supported the People's Vote campaign, which, unsuccessfully, campaigned for a new referendum. We have to recognize that the story of Brexit was a story full of lies from the start, he says. He's very critical of the British government. Prime Minister Johnson is a populist who only cares about his political interests and his political strategy. For that, he has to wage this kind of war with Europe, he says. The blame for problems is consistently passed on to the EU. At the same time, the British government lacks the ability to admit its own mistakes, also in dealing with the corona crisis. I would, and that's not Alastair Campbell now, that's me, I would love to see Boris Johnson for once standing in front of the press like Chancellor Angela Merkel did today. Short before I filmed this video, she gave a press conference where she stopped the Easter special lockdown they decided on Monday. She stood there, said it was a mistake. We take that back. It won't happen. 2 of the days of Easter where usually shops are open, the Thursday and the Saturday, were supposed that all shops have to be closed. But it was too short notice to practically do this. And so she stood there and didn't only say that was a mistake, we take it back. She said, it is my fault. I'm the Chancellor, it's my responsibility, so this is my fault. And I admit that in front of the whole press, and I'm doing it right now, right here. I would love to hear Boris Johnson ever to do that. But that's the difference. You will never hear Boris Johnson do that, what Chancellor Merkel did today. And so that's one of the reasons why I really want to bring you the video with what Alastair Campbell said. And he said also, we must never forget how Johnson was in the beginning. The mistakes that have been made. And we have these catastrophic deaths, he said. So far, only 50 million doses have been inoculated in the EU. At the same time, more than 50 million cans were exported, 10 million to the UK alone. It is news that the British Health Minister happily announces, but which will cause even more resentment in the European Union. Matt Hancock announced on Saturday via Twitter that every second adult in Great Britain is now receiving a corona vaccination, or has received it. And that's 28 million people. The news comes just one day after EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen tightened the tone against the British pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca because of the cut in the agreed deliveries of the corona vaccine. And that's a big cut there. She said, we have the option of prohibiting a planned export. That is the message to AstraZeneca. You first fulfill your contract with Europe before you start delivering to other countries, von der Leyen told the newspapers of the Funke Media Group. Already on Wednesday, von der Leyen threatened new requirements for countries that do not let any vaccine out of the country themselves, or that already have a higher proportion of people vaccinated than the EU. It was obvious that she was focusing primarily on the UK. She said, "We are ready to use all the instruments we need to achieve this. All options are on the table." She plans to put her proposals up for debate at the EU summit next week. A UK government spokesman said, "The current priority is to protect the UK people. We all rely on global supply chains," the spokesman said. "We expect the EU to keep its promises." It's a weird thing from a country that broke I don't know how many promises and contracts recently. According to the latest data on vaccine deliveries, around 70 million doses have been distributed in the EU so far. About 50 million of these have already been administered, 15 million of them as a second dose. Around 42 more million doses of vaccines have been sent from the EU to non-EU countries, of which the UK received 10 million. An EU document with these figures is available, for example, to the US medium Bloomberg. Some EU countries, including Italy and France, are in favor of an export ban. Others, such as Ireland, Belgium and the Netherlands, oppose this because of possible negative effects on EU companies. And that's because it is expected that AstraZeneca will deliver less than half of the agreed vaccine doses in the first quarter by the end of March, around 30 million. This cut is already causing a drop in sales for companies in Belgium and the Netherlands that are involved in the production chain. An export ban would add to the problems facing these companies. Germany has already received more than half of the agreed vaccine doses, around 3.4 of the 5.6 million, but still just a bit more than half. According to Bloomberg, it's not certain whether the remaining 2.2 million AstraZeneca cans will arrive by the end of March. The journalist Dave Keating, who is well informed about EU matters, also attributes the vaccine problems in the EU to the collaboration between the German manufacturer BioNTech and the US pharmaceutical company Pfizer. Because, first of all, the University of Oxford should also work with the US pharmaceutical company, namely Merck, not to be confused with the German company of the same name. The British Minister of Health, Hancock, however, expressed the fear that the US would only deliver vaccine when there was more than enough available on its own country. So the collaboration between Oxford and Merck did not come off. Instead, AstraZeneca, a British-Swedish company, came into play. It's fun that we have now the situation with the British feared with the US. Based on the experience from Great Britain, Keating believes that BioNTech, and thus also the EU, would have been better advised with a European competitor instead of Pfizer. In March 2020, US President Donald Trump tried to secure further vaccine deliveries to the US that were actually due to the EU. Ultimately unsuccessful, but he signed a decree in December 2020 that Americans have the privilege of getting the vaccine that is produced in the country. However, von der Leyen does not seem to have the USA in her sights. She said there was reciprocity in exchanges with the United States because vaccine components could be freely traded. The US had recently achieved the goal of 100 million vaccinations in the first 100 days of President Joe Biden's tenure after just 58 days. For these reasons, the Institute for the World Economy, the IFW, warns against an export ban on vaccines from the EU. Export bans are a very bad idea, said IFW President Gabriel Felbermayr to the Reuters news agency. For the production of vaccines, we in the EU are heavily dependent on imports from other countries. It's impossible to imagine what happens if the trading partners, for their part, restrict the export of critical preliminary products. Export bans would only worsen the real problem, that too little vaccine is produced worldwide, said Felbermayr. Instead of protectionism, we need cross-border cooperation in order to resolve the bottlenecks as quickly as possible. Combating a pandemic requires a global approach. And we will see if people listen to that or if they continue with their vaccine nationalism. And if you want to stay informed, please subscribe to my channel. Auf Wiedersehen.